Hey everybody, welcome back to History Student Reacts. Today we'll be watching The Goat of Holiday Animals by Extra History. This is another one of our holiday season reactions, so Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone out there watching. Now today we'll be learning a bit about Scandinavian holiday tradition, so I'm excited to get into it. Before I do, I'd appreciate it if you guys would leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and check out my Patreon, which is linked down below. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's jump right into this reaction.
A cozy Christmas Eve in Sweden, 1830. A warm glow flows through the peaceful home. A Yule log crackles on the hearth, warming the belly of a lounging cat. Her drowsy eyes blink as she purrs, while two children watch her huddled under a blanket.
Very nice, very familiar to a Christmas I would recognize. I will say, not to point any fingers, but some of these European Christmas traditions or holiday traditions we've seen have been a little bit strange. And I think especially in some of these areas around Northern Europe. Once again, not to point any fingers, but I think we might see some weird stuff in this one. Or at least stuff that's unfamiliar to me.
Snow piles up at the windows, and the smell of spiced wine's on the stove. Bang, bang, bang! Someone's at the door. The cat flips over, eyes wide, as the father of the children walks to the source of the clatter. He turns the knob, and the piece shatters.
What the?
Horned figures rush into the house, howling and singing. Men wearing animal skins and goat skulls.
Oh my.
Pagan chaos unleashed on Christmas. By their merry yells, they sound half intoxicated. One then leaps up on the table and bleats, "Meh," as the others descend on the house's sweets and mulled wine.
Oh my goodness, I will say, we saw in Extra History's Plum Pudding Riots video that, first of all, even in these sort of Christian Christmas seasons, a lot of pagan traditions had survived. A lot of them had been sort of rebranded as Christian, but you had a lot of these old traditional pagan traditions that still remained at that time. Additionally, we also saw in that video that a lot of Christmas or holiday traditions often involve drunken people stampeding, partying through the streets, and either being led into or breaking into any house they found to get food and more alcohol, right? So far, this isn't too different from holiday/Christmas tradition really anywhere else around this time.
The children shriek. The cat yowls and scrambles under a table. Then the biggest goat holds out a present? Wait, what? Much toasting then commences, and when it's over, they depart one stronger. For the father of this house has now joined them, donning his own skins and mask, becoming part of the ancient spirit of Scandinavian Christmas, the Yule goat.
Well, that's fun. They've got a Yule goat conga line.
This episode is brought to you by 80,000 Hours, a phenomenal nonprofit that wants to help you find an impactful dream job.
Nice.
Happy holidays, extra historians! Come on over and join us as we get all hoogie by the fire.
Happy holidays. And I will say, some of this type of stuff continued up until, and does continue up until the modern day. You know, in a lot of countries, until relatively recently, it wasn't so uncommon during Christmas, or I know in Britain and Scotland especially during New Year's Hogmanay, for people to go carousing through the streets, knocking on their neighbors' doors, being let in for a drink or some food, and then going to the next house. I don't know how common it is, like literally right now, but I'm speaking over the last couple decades, even into the 20th century. A lot of these Christmas traditions of carousing through the streets and entering people's homes survived, you know, in a different form maybe, but still survived.
That's Danish for cozy, BT dubs, as we head to the snows of Scandinavia to discuss a unique Christmas tradition from Northern Europe, the Yule goat. God, I've been waiting for this one. A cultural practice which many believe has distant roots in pagan traditions. However, we should be a little cautious here, because while it's often assumed that the Yule goat, along with other holiday symbols like Krampus or Christmas trees, have a pagan origin, we should note that there's no direct chain of evidence for that. There are strong thematic similarities for sure, but we can't definitively prove a link. And
okay, we don't necessarily know. I will say a lot of very pious Christians at the time certainly thought that a lot of these holiday traditions were pagan and wanted them gone, right? We saw in that Plum Pudding Riots video that the Puritans during the English Civil War, they were not into any of these Christmas traditions, which they saw as very un-Christian. But what they're saying here is we don't necessarily have a direct chain of evidence to lead a lot of these back to pagan traditions. Interesting.
And of course, then there's the fact that many of these symbols have been Christianized for 1,500 years,
right,
which makes their origins even more fuzzy.
But right, you're going back that far. It's pretty difficult to find the origins of just about anything, especially some of these vague and widespread traditions.
That's actually what makes Scandinavia unique, because Christianity came to it relatively late. See, Christianity diffused into Europe via the Roman Empire and its remnants, but, well, the Romans were a Mediterranean people who weren't fans of the cold and felt like they didn't belong too far north.
Yep.
As a result, the area only fully
very famously, up in Scotland, they got stopped. As, I'm Scottish, I'm American, I'm proud of that, as all Scots are. So the Romans, they got stopped whenever they went too far north.
Converted in the Middle Ages around the years 1000 to 1100, so it's often argued they retained more of their pre-Christian cultural practices and stories. And interestingly, one animal is all over Norse beliefs. Goats. The goat of animals, you might say. They are everywhere, from stories of sacrifices and feasts to mythology, something we know a little bit about. And for this next part, I'll put on the beanie for old time's sake. In Valhalla, a goat is said to stand chewing the leaves of an enchanted tree, shooting vast quantities of mead from its udders.
Oh,
it
wow.
was this magical tit alcohol that kept the dead heroes of Valhalla super buzzed through their eternal war/feast/keg party. Similarly, two enormous goats pulled Thor's chariot, and feature in a story where Thor, while traveling, stopped overnight with a family. Wanting a feast, he killed his goats to be roasted, but he instructed the family that the skins must be flayed, stretched, and none of the bones broken. The next morning, Thor raised his hammer and resurrected both goats.
God damn.
But then found one was limping. Boo. Yeah, one of the hosts had broken its leg bone to suck out the marrow. Furious, Thor seems about to destroy the family, but when they show contrition, he merely takes their children as his servants. Nice guy.
Oh, okay, very merciful. I guess compared to killing them all, but still a little harsh there, Thor.
Now, there are folklorists who connect this story with its themes of feasting, celebrations, and resurrection with the fact that Scandinavian Christmas is infested with goats. The theory goes that goats had a prominent place in pre-Christian midwinter celebrations, and that this was incorporated into Christian winter celebrations.
Interesting. I guess goats are pretty hardy animals, right? I imagine they could survive in some of those Scandinavian conditions. Perhaps an important part of daily life, which would make sense why they're an important part of holiday and then Christmas tradition. I don't know if that's the case, but just sort of thinking around it, whatever it is, seems like the goat, the animal, is a pretty big part of their tradition.
Which, maybe? Look, it's possible. But this theory is really more about vibes than evidence, and we haven't done our first episode of Extra Vibes yet, so there it is. Though, let's be clear, that does not stop the top-tier goating about during Scandinavian Christmas. The most prominent appearance being the Yule goat decoration, a straw animal tied with red ribbons. Today, they're made in all sizes, used as decorations on Christmas trees and front doorsteps. Heck, they're so common that some years you can even buy them at IKEA, canonically where vibes go to die. I kid, I love my kludge. Traditionally, though, these Yule goats were made from the last sheaf of...
Okay, any of y'all from one of these Scandinavian countries down below, you gotta tell me, what parts of this do you still practice today? What parts of this don't you practice? I'm very curious about your holiday Christmas traditions now.
Grain as a symbol of the harvest being complete, and they're probably related to similar corn dollies made at harvest in England, then buried in the sowing season. Because remember, these areas are heavily related due to the Viking expansion, which you can learn more about in our complete series here. While mostly decorative, these also used to be part of an elaborate winter prank game. Someone would make a large Yule goat, say the size of a dog, and then hide it around their neighbor's house, perhaps on their roof or in the backseat of their car. The victim, startled, would then be required to hide the goat for someone else. And this tradition of using Yule goats as a form of prank has mutated into a bizarre legacy involving the most famous straw goat, the giant Yule goat erected annually in Gävle, Sweden. First erected in 1966, the Yule goat has graced the town square since, but only 16 times has it survived to Christmas. Every other year, vandals and pranksters have destroyed it, usually by burning it down.
Damn.
But why? Well, basically because it's flammable and people think it's funny. Most years it's a straightforward lighter situation, you know? But as authorities have tried to prevent it by chemically fireproofing the goat or soaking it with hoses so it iced over, the saboteurs too have become more inventive. One year, it was hit by a car. Another year, two vandals dressed as Santa and a gingerbread man shot it with a flaming arrow. Another year.
I guess you can't stop people from getting up to mischief, especially around the holidays. This grows increasingly, sort of escalates as the authorities continue to try and protect the thing, and the methods start to get more and more intense, you could say.
Year, a new security system outfitting the area with cameras was taken offline in a hack before it was burned again.
Wow.
And in 1985, it was burned despite being guarded by soldiers.
Damn.
Please keep in mind, this is expressly illegal. Burning the goat carries a hefty fine and even jail time. Yet people still do it. And as a result, the Yule goat has become a world-famous tourist attraction, which probably is for the best since Yavle's only other claim to fame is connected to one of Sweden's nastiest witch trials. But it isn't all straw goats, you know? Until the early 20th century, as we depicted at the beginning of this episode, the, quote, Yule goat would visit your house. This was known as Julebuking, and it was a sort of combination of wassailing and trick-or-treating. Like other traditions of this type, the Yule buckers would come by the house.
Yeah, like I was saying, there's similarities to other traditions we've seen at both the sort of fall season and the winter. Now, I always wonder about some of these more classic or older traditions and how they survive today, right? Because in a lot of places that celebrate Christmas, and frankly, places that didn't used to, Christmas has become this big sort of commercial thing. You know, around the world, even countries or regions that don't traditionally celebrate Christmas, they now celebrate some form of it because of how commercial it's become, you know, all the products that spread around the world, right? I think for a lot of people, it still involves getting together with family and friends, you know, making merry, that sort of thing, but you think about things associated with Christmas, it's a lot of the products that are involved. And so, with the culture so closely themed around that, and you can thank a lot of big companies, Coca-Cola is probably the first and foremost for that. I always wonder about these more classic Christmas traditions or holiday traditions and how many and how widely they survive in a lot of different countries, right? Because I think a lot of these traditions, in some places at least, have been pushed out by a sort of more modern commercial version of Christmas, often originating out of the United Kingdom and the United States, especially in the 20th century. Like I said, Coca-Cola, a lot of these companies pushing these advertisements and products out of the US. So, you know, just something to think about. And once again, if you practice any of these, feel free to share them down below. And wherever you are in the world, I'd be interested to hear what sort of unique holiday traditions you celebrate around this time of the year.
And trick-or-treating. Like other traditions of this type, the Yule buckers would come by the house to sing and perform, and in return receive food and drink. And of course, much like wassailing, see last year's holiday episode for more on that.
Yep, well, we just watched that one.
Menacing nature of the goat costume and the home invasion portion had a sort of undertone of pay up or we trash the place.
Right, it's sort of jolly, merry until it isn't, right? Everyone's in a good mood, everyone's carousing through the streets, but there's sort of a fine line between a big drunken party and a riot, right? So if someone, you know, gets into a dispute or a fight, or someone refuses to let them in, and they keep pushing, then it can devolve into a home invasion as the group breaks into the home, takes the food and drink, and goes on their way.
In fact, it's been suggested performers were often seasonally unemployed agricultural laborers who needed extra help to get them through to planting time. Though Julebuking was unique in that one member of a visited house had to then costume up and join the rowdy procession as they carried on to the next location. Yet again, much like with wassailing, as Scandinavia moved into the mid-19th century, the Yule goats got less rowdy. First of all, they started bringing presents rather than taking them, serving as a kind of Santa-like gift-giving figure.
Right.
Next, they started becoming more human. No one knows exactly why, but it's probably because the goat invasions were frickin' terrifying. So the Yule goat didn't...
Yeah, I mean, I think, and once again we talked about this with Britain, that as you get into the 19th century, you enter into this sort of Victorian era of manners and acting properly. You know, there's a very sort of strict moral code, I suppose. A lot of mores that everyone lives by. I think a lot of these traditions sort of went out of practice, were seen as a bit uncouth. You know, the carousing around in the streets, all the sort of uptight middle-class Victorians, oh, we wouldn't possibly want to do that. I am thinking more of England, but I do think this applies a little more widely. And then additionally, now of course this had been a thing for a while, it's not like they became Christian at that time, they'd already been Christian, but a lot of these traditions, you know, once again, not just talking about this one, but a little more broadly, were sort of seen as pagan, maybe a little scandalous as such, and so a lot of the holiday Christmas traditions began to shift. They had been shifting, but I think especially in the 19th century, you did see quite a transformation, but a transformation that had already been happening, right? Once again, we talked about it in that plum pudding riots video. The transformation of England's Christmas practices had been happening for a while at this point.
Fill that role of a gift giver all that well in its original form. At the same time as the 19th century progressed, media depictions of other Christmas gift-giving figures made popular in poetry, Christmas cards, and art.
Right, there's that as well. I was talking about sort of commercialization in the 20th century, but of course that was a process that had already begun. You know, media depictions, mass media, mass products that were becoming more available in the 1800s to the average person. That sort of normalizes a particular vision of the holidays, a particular vision of Christmas and the culture surrounding it, and so everything becomes a little more generic because of that, right? So once again, that's a process that was already happening at that time.
Started to take over the culture. Some were foreign. In certain parts of Scandinavia, the Yule goat morphed into the Yule man, a bearded figure influenced by the British Father Christmas and American Santa Claus.
Right.
Yet, despite this transformation, in Finland, he's still called the Yule goat. And occasionally, pictures of this Yule man will have him riding a sleigh drawn by goats. It's all tied together.
Nice.
In other countries, some gift-giving duties were passed on to folkloric elf-like creatures called Nisse in Norway and Tomte in Denmark, said to be household sprites that take care of plots of land. Often portrayed in Christmas cards and wooden dolls, sometimes riding goats. These creatures have become cuter in the last century, as well as adopting the red pointy hat from Santa Claus.
Yeah, you can call this sort of the Disneyification of traditional folklore. You know, you see this especially in Europe because a lot of the sort of modern Disney movies are based on German but European folklore more broadly. And these things have sort of been taken and Disneyified, right? Cleaned up, made less morbid, because a lot of these old traditions and tales were quite morbid. They could be violent. They've been made a lot more acute, a lot more presentable, a lot more commercial, and then, you know, once again, a lot of that does originate from the United States, but it spreads around the world and even spreads back to those countries where these myths originated from, which is kind of strange to think about.
I mean, look at them. They are pretty adorable. Which is just kind of super neat, right?
And when I say Disneyification, I'm talking about Disney, but also this is a broader cultural trend. It's not just Disney making these changes, it's all these types of media depictions, just to be clear. Disney's just sort of the number one actor in this space.
We have winter traditions that may stretch all the way back to before written records, which have stuck around long enough to be shaped by Victorian moralism and mass media.
Yep.
Again,
Victorian moralism, that's part of what I was looking for, that word right there.
These are possibly ancient pre-Christian symbols that have survived so long that you can buy them at IKEA, which Rob has done. It sits beside his Krampus ornament, Niso figures, and Yule lad. Though he is still holding out for that Catalonian poop log, those things are apparently hard to come by in Hong Kong. Maybe we can get him one in the mail. But whatever figure helps you celebrate the season, whether it's a Krampus, Kagatillo, Frau Peshta, the Yule goat, or a very, very wax-caked menorah or kinara, all of us at Extra History wish you and yours the happiest of holiday seasons and hope that your new year is truly the GOAT. Of course, a greatest of all time way to kick off your 2025 might just be finding that new job that not only you'll love.
All right, I'll let the sponsor play through because it is a new video. we want to show them support, so you can go and check out their video. It's linked down below. Give them a like, check out their sponsor. We'll let this play through.
Make a positive impact in the world. And look, I know that planning your career can be really overwhelming, but that's why I'm psyched today to tell you about 80,000 Hours. 80,000 Hours is a nonprofit that helps people find careers with a strong social impact for free. And their work, based off of a decade of research alongside academics, head to 80,000.
There you go. All right, there's their link. So once again, go check out their video, go check out their sponsor, show Extra History support for making these videos that we can enjoy and react to. So with that, hey, Merry Christmas to everyone watching, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year, right? The whole thing. Hope everyone's having a great festive holiday season, however you celebrate. Once again, I'd love for y'all to tell me down below what you're doing to celebrate this year and what you sort of traditionally do wherever you're from. Yeah, we learned about some Scandinavian holiday tradition in this one. Very interesting. So yeah, hope you guys are all having a great day today, a great holiday season, and I'll see you all again next time. Goodbye.